Okay, as I said, we're learning a Baomer mimer. Today's Baomer. It's a very, very special day. We're celebrating Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Actually, let me. Okay, if you guys can maybe mute yourselves, that would be great. Um, so today, as we said, is Baomer. We're celebrating Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Very, very, very special person. Very special rabbi. A huge tzaddik. He's the source of Kabbalah. He's the one that gave us the Zohar, right? Which is the most instrumental, most basic book. Basic, I mean, more like foundational book of Kabbalah. Okay, and we were talking about a story, right? We started the mimer with a pasuk. The pasuk is Shir Malais Ine Matuv Manayim Sheves Achim Gam Yachad. It's a big, well-known pasuk, right? Which basically means a song of ascension to David. How beautiful and how great it is when siblings sit together. Sheves Achim, where siblings sit also together, right? And we explained that it was talking about it was like a bride and a groom, and it also was talking about the connection between God and the Jewish people. And we said that the word Sheves Achim, the siblings sit, implies connectivity, implies a connection. And the fact that it adds Gam Yachad implies two levels of connection, one level being kind of a more external connection, then Gam Yachad means unification. So we said that this is referring to a bride and a groom. First, they get engaged, which is a level, sort of a more superficial connection, and then they get married, which is already a level of unification. We said that this applies also to the Jewish people and God. It's also representing the Jewish people and God, who are like a bride and a groom, right? There's a marriage between the Jewish people and God. Okay. And then we said that in order, and this applies also to the Jewish people as a people, right? That in order to connect to another person in a level of unity, you first need to connect with God, just like the Jewish people and the bride. So it's like a full circle, right? God connects to the Jewish people like a bride and a groom, and in order for you to connect to another Jewish person, this level of awareness, where you're one with God, needs to be there, so you can then be one with another person. Okay, so that's that second level. Okay, then we brought we still have a few questions that we need to understand, and then we brought a story. This story is going to be the basis of our mimer, right? The story was how there was once a drought, there was no rain, and no matter what they did, they couldn't get it to rain, and it was very, people were in danger. So they came to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said a pasuk, the verse that we have here in our mimer, which is a verse that has a connection with rain. We're not going to get into right now. And he said that verse, it automatically, boom, just he said the verse and it started to rain, right? And we need to understand, like, why is it that he was able to do such a thing, right? And let me see if we got into this. And we started explaining there's a difference between prayer and Torah. Prayer goes from below to above. Basically, you work on yourself, you reach up as a person, and you reach up to God and say, God, please help me. And that is able to create a new reality that's been brought down to this world, right? As opposed to Torah, which goes from above to below, right? Torah is something that begins with God, is God's wisdom, and it comes down and is given to us. Okay, that was what we covered, right? And we said that the reason why Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, through Torah, through saying a verse of Tehillim, right, which is Torah, he was able to affect what usually takes tefillah, right? It requires davening to affect, right? He was able to change the world, to make rain, right, through Torah. He didn't need to go through the process of doing tefillah. And we need to understand, why does Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai have the ability, right, to accomplish what tefillah accomplishes through Torah? Okay, we need to understand those distinctions and why he was able to do what he was able to do. All this was just the recap. Okay, so let's jump straight in. Okay, right? The thing is like this. We need to understand, right, that the difference between Torah and tefillah is somewhat similar to the difference between prayer, right, tefillah, and a blessing. Okay, there's two separate things, right? When a person prays and when a person gives a blessing, right? What's the difference, right? The difference is when a person prays, it kind of, like we said before, one is entreating God. He's saying, please, please give me something, give me a blessing, give me whatever is health, wealth, whatever it is that person is asking for, right? You're reaching up in a way and you're asking to be given something, right? But when a person gives a blessing, how do you give a blessing? You should be healthy, you should be wealthy. It's a commandment. You're not asking, you're not saying, oh God, please, give this person whatever it is. That's prayer. You're commanding, right, a blessing to be given, something to happen. And when a person is the type of person, or is a person that is in a state that is able to give blessings, right? Like like Avraham Avinu has said that God gave him the power to bless. That means that you give a blessing and it actually, materialize, right? Like you say when the Kohanim are giving Birkas Kohanim at certain times a year, they have a special power to bless, like tzaddikim who are so connected with God that they have a power to just give a blessing. And sometimes us, right, when we're in a situation that perhaps we're in a we're a farbrengen, or we are in a situation where we're so connected to the other person that we are able to give a blessing that actually materializes, right? What we do is we're giving a commandment. This should happen, right? And that materializes, that actually happens, okay? So the difference is, right, that the one that is trying to get, that's praying, is coming from below and is asking, give me a blessing. The one that's giving an actual blessing, a bracha, right, this person is actually higher than the source of the blessing. That's why it works, right? If you are higher, if you're more elevated, more I guess in a holier, if you're from a holier level than the source of the blessing itself, then you're able to command that blessing to come down and actually take effect, right? And that's why you don't require entreating, you don't require pleading. What you require is you just have to make that commandment, and that actually happens, right? And that's why it's a commandment, right? When you say you should be blessed, you should be wealthy, or whatever it is, it's in a way of command. Okay. Now we see that there's the advantage, right? You clearly see, well, which one's better, a blessing or a prayer, right? So first thing you think is, well, a blessing is much better, right? When a person is able to just give a commandment and make it so that it comes down and it actually materializes, you don't have to be asking, you don't have to be pleading, you just kind of make it happen. It's much better, right? And the reality is that when you look into it, right, the advantage that bracha, that a blessing has over a prayer, is only as it relates to the person giving the blessing, which means to say that the person giving the blessing is in a higher level, which means that they're able to command something lower to come down, right? But when it comes to the actual blessing, the actual thing that's happening, right, we find that Fela has a much stronger power. What does that mean? It means that in order to give a blessing, what a person can do is what is already up there, right? Something that exists in potential, right? They say that for whatever reason that's blocked, that's not coming down, and they say, no, I'm going to make it come down, and they force it down. Okay. However, if it doesn't exist in potential, if it doesn't exist, the ability doesn't exist in the spiritual realm, right? Giving a blessing is not going to help. There's nothing to command to come down. So you're working within limited boundaries, right? There's a story, right? Of a person who was very close to the Rebbe. I forget exactly who it was. So I have an idea, but I'm not sure. So, it was a person that was very close to the Rebbe, very, very important, very, distinguished chassid, and he never had kids, and he never had kids, and he never had kids, and he kept coming to the Rebbe. And he needed a blessing for kids, and he needed a blessing for kids, and the Rebbe, like never gave him the blessing. He always kind of like giving a blessing for something else, or something else, or something else. And a lot of times this happened, and it always kind of like led to, the Rebbe somehow, in a specific time, you hear these stories, and the Rebbe found a way. But with this chassid, it always kept happening to the point that one day, the chassid was asking, and the Rebbe started, like the Rebbe's eyes teared up, and he says, "Listen, what can I do? What can I do for you? I don't have kids either." What the Rebbe was trying to say is, sometimes I need something to work with, and for whatever reason that the Rebbe understands, we don't understand, In this specific scenario, this person, God was very, very like, there was no way this is not going to happen, right? You find sometimes stories that you hear that a person had. There's a story with Baal Shem Tov that a person had. It was very, very wealthy, and and it was, but he couldn't have any kids. And the kids of Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov told him, listen, there's three types of blessing. There's kids, wealth, and a long life, right? You have two, but you don't have the third one. You don't have kids. You have long life and kids. What I can do for you, right, is I could divert one for the other. And the details, I'm not great with the details of the stories. I haven't heard in a long time. But the idea was basically I can divert one to the other. So if you want, I'll give you kids, but then you'll lose your money, right? And he said, okay. And that's what he did. And the guy lost all his money, but he had kids. And then, again, I might be butchering the story, but that's the general idea. The point here is that when you're giving a blessing, right, we believe tzaddikim, they can do anything, which in part, it's partially true, but within this framework of giving blessings is still, they are limited to whatever the possibility is, right? Again, it's something that's stuck and they can't, they can order it down, but if it's not there, right, they can't create it through a blessing. Okay, and that's where tefillah, okay, davening, has a stronger power that even a blessing has. Okay, because what tefillah does, tefillah reaches out, but it reaches out all the way past all spiritual levels, straight into God, and says, God, please, please, please give this to me. And God does not have to, is it there? Is it not there? God can overrule everything. So that's what we say. If there is no will, if you don't will it to be, I beg of you, please have a will, create a new will, a will that this is going to happen, right? And because we're reaching straight to the core, straight to God himself, right? This allows that God that can create, God can do anything, right? And it could create a new reality. It doesn't need to work with existing factors, doesn't need to work with existing or past, spiritual levels. It just could create something new. And that's what one of the things that we say over and over as we pray is Yehi Ratzon, right? We start a lot of prayers, Yehi Ratzon milfanecha, let it be your will. What does that mean? If it's not your will, create a new will. Let this be your will. Create a brand new thing. So the idea is that while bracha works in a way that you can command down if you're in such a level, right? Well, tefillah, you have to beg and you have to plead, right? Tefillah, nevertheless, reaches a very, very deep level of godliness that allows you to create a new reality no matter what. There's no limits to this, right? It could be the greatest, harshest desire, the greatest, harshest decree. And through prayer, right, you can reach and you can create this new existence, okay? It's something that's very, very powerful. Okay, and the reason why tefillah has this power to reach in such a deep, deep place is specifically because it's coming from the lowest, right? Because it's something that requires a person in its, poor, limited, miserable self, as a human being, right? With a broken heart, reach up, and that is the ability. The lowest has the ability to reach to the highest point. Okay, and it requires a lot of work. It's not easy. To pray with a broken heart, to pray with an honest heart is not an easy thing. So it requires a person to really be sincere, okay? And because of that, it has the ability to reach a much higher, okay? Okay. Now, the thing is, so now this is the distinction between tefillah and bracha. Right now, going back to our original question, the distinction between Torah and tefillah, right? We're going to go into the distinction. We said Torah is from above to below and tefillah is from below to above. Nevertheless, you do see that with Torah, you also have, in a certain way, not as strong, it's not the emphasis as is in tefillah, but with Torah, you also have this concept of creating a new reality, of changing the world, right? When a person, a Talmid Chacham, a sage, comes in and says, this is the psak din, this is what Allah is going to be like, this is what the rule is, right? In a way that's changing the dynamics of the cosmos. It's changing the world. It's changing the way things interact in this world, spiritually and even physically. Okay, that happens when a person says, this is the Allah, right? There's a story, right? I thought it was very, very cool. A very unique story. Okay, there are two great, two very well-known Poiskim, basically, how do you say Poiskim? The people that know Jewish law very, very well and establish Jewish law. Okay, and the Shulchan Aruch, kind of there's two sides, right? There's the Shulchan Aruch that was written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, who lived in Tzfas in Israel, and there's the kind of a similar book that was written by a rabbi called Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, is the Ramah, who lived in Poland. Okay, and sometimes they disagree, and the way that it works is that Ashkenazim go like the Ramah for the most part, right, and Sephardim go like Rabbi Yosef Karo in Israel. Okay, so now they follow me here for a second because it's a very interesting story. What happened was there was a person who lived in Poland, okay, and he had some sort of disease, and it was some sort of a thing that it was like a thing outside of the lungs that kind of connected the lung to the side of the body, and it could be potentially deadly, right? So he came over, they couldn't figure out how to cure it, and he came to the Ramah, okay, and asked him to give him a blessing to cure him, right? And the Ramah said, what you should do is you need to go to Tzfat, you need to travel to Israel and live there, move there, and ask Rabbi Yosef Karo that he should give you a blessing. That that you should you should go to Rabbi Yosef Karo, ask him for a blessing, and you should live in Israel. So the question was, why? Why did he need to move? And the Ramah answered. It was very, very interesting what the Ramah said. He said like this: this disease that you have exists in animals as well, in cows. Okay, meaning sometimes it's called the Circain in Shulchan Aruch, they discuss it, right? The question is, if an animal is about to die, right? If an animal is not going to live the year, right? Even if you do shchita and you kill it in a kosher way, the animal is treif. It's not kosher. You can't eat it. Okay, an animal that's sick, that's not going to live more than a year, is not kosher to eat. Okay, so the Ramah says to this person, says, there's a question in halacha. If a cow has this disease that you have, is it considered a treifa, meaning that it's not going to live more than a year, and therefore it's not kosher? Or is it considered that it could live more than a year, and therefore it's considered kosher? Okay, so can you eat this cow that has this disease that you have? Can we eat this cow? Right? I say my conclusion as the halachic authority, that's the word I was looking for, the halachic authority in Poland is that it's treif, that that animal will not live the year. It's impossible, and therefore it's going to die. You can't eat that cow. However, my colleague in Israel, Rav Yosef Karo, the halachic authority there, he says that an animal that has this disease will live. He can potentially live more than a year, not a problem. Therefore, the animal is kosher. He says, right now, you're in Poland, you're under my authority, my my area. So therefore, you're affected by my halachic ruling. And according to my halachic ruling, an animal that has that disease will not live the year. Therefore, I can't help you because halachically, in the way the physicality works in this area is that you can't live the year because you have that disease. But if you go to my colleague in Israel and you're under his authority, where he decides that he rules in terms of Jewish law, and he says that an animal like that is kosher because it could live the year, that he can help you over there. The way things work is different. So what we see from this story is that just by the ruling in halacha, just by ruling in the way of Jewish law, right, in Torah, right, it affects the way that nature works. It affects the way this person, can he survive the year or can he not survive the year? That's going to be affected by what is the Jewish law, the way that it's applied. And if there's a difference between places, it can actually create a difference. It's a very, very powerful story. But the point here is that you see that Torah, it has, in one way or another, in a general way, has the ability to affect the world, to change the world. Similar, not 100% like, but similar to Fela. Okay? Okay, and the different thing is, because Torah, when Torah does have this effect, it happens in an automatic way, because as we said, it comes from above to below, right? Because it does, and therefore it doesn't require pleading and begging. Okay. And this is something that you see, that the Torah, the Gemara calls "Mein Malkei Rabbanan," who are the kings of the Jewish people, are our sages, right? Because they like a king makes a decree, this should happen. A sage, right, a tzaddik, is able to do the same, right? And just like we say also that when tzaddik geizer, Kadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim, when a tzaddik makes a decree, God fulfills it, and therefore it happens automatically because it's a decree. It comes from the king himself. Okay, and you see that as well with all this the different miracles that we see in the Torah, where you see that a tzaddik didn't have to beg, God, please do a miracle for me. It kind of happens, a tzaddik did X, Y, and Z. He learned something, he said something in Torah, and boom, it automatically was able to do a miracle. Okay. Nevertheless, okay, now that even though that Torah does have somewhat this ability to change the world, right? Nevertheless, it is still limited, right? Because ultimately, Torah is chokhmah. Torah is wisdom, the wisdom of God. Okay, which is higher than the wisdom, the chokhmah, the wisdom of creating the world. This is God's wisdom, right? So therefore, it's able to affect the world, right? Nevertheless, let me see. Nevertheless, right? Nevertheless, it's not God himself, right? So it's still limited within the boundaries of logic, of intellect, God's wisdom, but God's intellect. What does God believe, is reasonable, right? And Torah is able to draw down from there, but not higher. While Tefillah, right, is able to go straight up, as we said, straight up to the core, straight up to God himself, above his wisdom, above everything, and just say, God, I don't care about anything, please help me. And God could do that. So Tefillah is able to reach much, much deeper. Okay. So now the Chiddush, the beauty, what was crazy about what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did when he made it rain, okay, is that he did that. What did they do? What did the sages do when they made a change in the world? They came up with a logic proving that in Torah, that according to God's wisdom, this is the way that it should be. And therefore, boom, the river needs to split. Therefore, boom, this miracle needs to happen. Because according to Torah, this needs to happen, and I'm proving it. So therefore, this is God's wisdom, and I can draw that down, make it physical, and a miracle can happen, right? But the way you do that is by proving that this is what Torah wants. This is God's wisdom. This is what's required. What Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai didn't do that. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai didn't bring the whole pasuk and starts proving how right now it needs to rain. He didn't do that. What Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did do, he just said a verse of Torah, which somehow was connected to rain, and that was able to reach far, far, far into God himself, and draw down something completely new. So what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did, and this is, now we're starting to understand a little bit the power of what this story carries, is that he was able to do exactly the same thing that Tefillah does, which reaches to the very core of God and asks him to create something brand new, right? Which was, in this case, rain, in a situation where rain was not deserved, okay? But he was able to do that through Torah in a way that was not from below to above, but was commanded down, right? And that is super unique, okay? And the reason why, we could say that the reason why Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai specifically is the person that is able to do such a thing, which is very, very unique, as we said, right? Is because the Torah of Rav Shpi is the most internal part of the Torah. Okay, as we said, Rav Shpi is the father in a way of Kabbalah, of the innermost parts of the Torah, the secrets of the Torah, right? And that level of Torah, which Rav Shpi represents and his Torah represents, is able to reach up until the point of oneness with God. Okay, and therefore, through his saying his Torah, right, through his saying the pasuk that he said, he was able to reach to where Tefillah is able to reach and draw that down, because he represents the innermost part of the Torah, Pnimis of Torah, the secrets, the Kabbalah of the Torah, which is connected and one with God at its essence. Okay, I guess we'll stop here. We're running out of time, but we'll continue in Mitzvah Hashem next week. Do you guys have any questions? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Anyway, I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll see each other.